A group of European countries are secretly working on a plan to send their troops to Ukraine to help secure any future peace deal with Russia. The AP has learned that Britain and France are leading the plan, but there are no other details. The countries involved are reluctant to play their cards and give Russian dictator Putin an advantage if he agrees to negotiate an end to the war, the publication wrote. I won't go into the specifics of the possibilities, but I agree that if there is to be peace, there has to be some security guarantees for Ukraine, and the UK will play its part in that. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said cautiously. The publication noted that the Europeans began studying the issue of sending their troops to Ukraine about a year ago, but now the discussions have accelerated due to concerns that US President Donald Trump could bypass them and possibly Ukraine in order to reach an agreement with Putin. The publication noted that late last year, a group of European leaders met with Zelensky at the residence of NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte in Brussels. They came from the UK, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Poland. Senior EU officials were also present. The talks at the meeting were based on the idea put forward by French President Emmanuel Macron in early 2024 to send a foreign contingent to Ukraine. At the time, his idea was met with hostility by Poland and Germany. At the time, Macron seemed isolated on the European stage with his idea, but now his plan has gained momentum. However, journalists noted what this contingent will look like and who will take part will depend on the terms of any peace settlement and much more. Italy has constitutional limits on the use of its forces. The Netherlands will need a green light from its parliament, as will Germany, whose position could change after elections on February the 23rd that will lead to the formation of a new government. Poland is cautious, given its continuing hostility with Ukraine, the publication analysed. We are at a very early stage. Estonian Defence Minister Hanno Pevkur told the publication on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. While there are various discussions and rumours, it is critically important for European allies to understand what the contact line in Ukraine will look like before developing a plan. Pevkur said. The Estonian minister gave the example that if Russia and Ukraine reduce their forces along the front line to a couple of thousand, then it is not a problem for Europe to be there either, but it will be much more difficult if there is a simmering conflict. The composition and role of the forces will be dictated by the type of peace agreement reached. If Russia and Ukraine can agree on terms, then fewer security measures and fewer forces will likely be needed. But experts and officials warned that as things stand, the Europeans may deploy a strong and substantial force, not a team of peacekeepers like the UN's Blue Helmets. It has to be a real force, so the Russians know that if they ever test it, they will be crushed. And you can be sure that Russia will test it, said Ben Hodges, a former commander of US Army Europe. They are violating all the agreements. So if we send forces there, they have to have air power, large ground forces, drones, counter-drones, air defense, missile defense. All of that. If they go there with a bunch of blue helmets and rifles, they will be crushed, he said. Retired French General Dominique Trinquant, former head of France's military mission to the UN, agreed that UN peacekeepers are better suited to deploy in areas that are much more stable. To begin with, it would take about a year to carry out such an operation with soldiers drawn from all over the world, he said.
A drone armed with a warhead hit the protective outer shell of Ukraine's Chernobyl nuclear plant early Friday, punching a hole in the structure and briefly starting a fire, in an attack Kiev blamed on Russia. The Kremlin denied it was responsible. According to Associated Press, radiation levels at the shuttered plant in the Kyiv region, site of the world's worst nuclear accident, have not increased, according to the UN International Atomic Energy Agency, which said the strike did not breach the plant's inner containment shell. The IAEA did not attribute blame, saying only that its team stationed at the site heard an explosion and was informed that a drone had struck the shell. Fighting around nuclear power plants has repeatedly raised fears of a nuclear catastrophe during 3 years of war, particularly in a country where many vividly remember the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, which killed at least 30 people and spewed radioactive fallout over much of the northern hemisphere. Technical director and chief engineer for Chernobyl Alexander Titorchuk said the attack could have been much worse. If this explosion had happened 15 to 20 meters in the other direction, it would have hit the old shelter, which is already 40 years old. This shelter is protected by a new secure confinement to increase safety, as a barrier to the spread of radioactive substances. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is Europe's biggest, has occasionally been hit by drones during the war without causing significant damage. The strike came 2 days after President Donald Trump upended U.S. policy on Ukraine, saying he would meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss ending the war. The move seemed to identify Putin as the only player that matters and looked set to sideline Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as European governments, in any peace talks.
Сьогодні о першій ночі 59 хвилин атакою дрона типу «Шахед», це був дрон «Герань», було здійснено атаку на арку НБК
Ну, скажу, що якщо б це було десь метрів там 15-20 в сторону в другу, то він би попав би зразу на старе укриття, якому вже 40 років, яке забезпечено оцим новим безпечним конфайнментом для підвищення безпеки, як бар'єр на шляху розповсюдження радіоактивних речовин. Вони могли бути набагато гірші і плачевні, ніж зараз.
Серега, ти зробив клас?
На сьогоднішній день і на сьогоднішню годину ситуація під контролем. Сьогодні ми локалізували практично всю ситуацію, яка могла привести до плачевних наслідків.